You ever read a rule or a law and just think to yourself, that can't possibly be right? Our whole legal system is built on laws written with very precise words, but what happens when following those words, word for word, leads to a result that's just completely absurd? Well, believe it or not, our courts have a pretty clever tool for exactly this situation, a way to inject some common sense when a law's text just goes off the rails.
So this is the big question, right? If a law, when you read it in plain English, leads to a nonsensical conclusion, are judges just stuck with it? Do they have to enforce something that makes absolutely no sense? Or is there a way out of the mess?
All right, let's play this out with a really simple example. Picture this. You're at the entrance to a beautiful city park, and there's a big sign. The sign is based on a real local law, and it says, very clearly, all vehicles are forbidden in the park. Seems pretty straightforward. The goal was obviously to keep the park peaceful, keep people safe. Makes total sense.
But then, you hear sirens. An ambulance with its lights flashing races into the park to respond to a medical emergency. Now, hold on. An ambulance? That's a vehicle. So, technically, is the paramedic supposed to get a ticket for trying to save a life? Of course not. That's ridiculous. And it's this exact kind of problem that shows why our legal system needed a common sense safety valve.
So, how does the legal system solve a puzzle like this? Well, it's not by just ignoring the law. It's by digging a little deeper to find its real purpose. And judges have a specific method they can use to do just that.
Judges aren't just robots, They're not just programmed to read text and spit out a result. They have a tool that lets them look past a flawed, literal meaning and get to the heart of what the lawmakers were actually trying to do. It's all about making sure the spirit of the law wins, even when the letter of the law is a bit clumsy.
And this solution has a name. It's called the Golden Rule. The logic behind it is simple, but really powerful. It says that if a literal, plain English reading of a law leads to a totally absurd result, the court can adjust the interpretation just enough to match what the lawmakers probably intended in the first place, which is a just and fair outcome.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the why. But how does a judge actually use this rule in a real-life case? It's not just a gut feeling. It's a very clear, structured process. You can think of it as a simple two-step process. First, step 1, the judge just reads the law literally. What do the words on the page say? But then, and this is the crucial part, comes step 2. If that literal reading leads to a ridiculous result, like, ticketing our ambulance, they're allowed to modify the meaning just enough to get back to the law's original sensible goal. So let's bring it back to our park and see the difference side by side. The literal reading is almost robotic. An ambulance is a vehicle, period, so it's banned. But the Golden Rule reading, it allows for actual human reason. A judge can look at it and say, wait a second, the whole point of this law was to stop people from joyriding, not to block emergency services. The goal was always public safety, and letting the ambulance in is the only way to serve that goal.
Ultimately, this whole thing isn't just some clever legal trick. It's a really fundamental principle that keeps our justice system grounded in reality and, in fairness. At its very heart, the Golden Rule is all about finding that just and equitable intention of the lawmakers. It's a tool that empowers judges to make sure the law actually leads to fair and reasonable outcomes, which is really the foundation of what we all expect from our justice system.
So why does all this matter to us? Well, because it means our laws get applied with common sense. It stops those bizarre, unintended side effects that lawmakers never wanted in the first place. It makes the entire system more flexible, more fair. And most importantly, it makes sure that we follow the spirit of the law, the real reason it was created, even if the exact words used weren't quite perfect.
And all of this leaves us with one final pretty big question to chew on. The Golden Rule is a powerful tool for sure, but it takes careful judgment. There's a really fine line between interpreting a law to find its true meaning and just flat out changing it into something new. So how do we make sure our judges stay on the right side of that line? That's a debate that sits at the very heart of how our justice system is supposed to work.